Okay, over to Jeremy. Friends, thank you very, very much indeed for that. This hall has seen great people speaking, and I can't come to anywhere on Merseyside without thinking of all kinds of great people and all kinds of great campaigns and disputes, but always I think of Tony Benn and all the work he did, both here and everywhere else, and we miss Tony, don't we? Yeah. What a band. And then a little bit about this campaign. John McDonnell is the chair of our group in Parliament and a very good and very close friend of mine. And after the election defeat, we had a meeting and we tried to, some of you may even have been there, of Labour Representation Committee, and discussed the consequences of the election defeat. This was on the Monday after the defeat. And we went through it, and I'll come back to that in a moment. Then we discussed what we should do about the Labour Party and what we should do in the party. And we had a discussion about whether or not we should challenge for the leadership or we should push for a policy debate. I pushed for a policy debate. I raised it at the Parliamentary Labour Party. I raised it in lots of places. I said, look, what we need is to examine where we went wrong on economic policy, where we went wrong on social policy, where we went wrong on the fundamental message we're giving to people. And by the way, I just always throw this in, we're still paying the price of 2003 when we illegally invaded Iraq. So think about all those things. Well, there wasn't a policy debate. The National Executive decided there would be a leadership election and the election would take place and the results will come out in September. So we discussed again what to do. And then we decided that we should put a candidate in the ring. And I'm talking about we here because this is about we. All of us. We are in this together. Cameron doesn't understand that. He doesn't understand who we are anyway. And so we decided to put up a candidate, and I was asked to undertake that task, and I'm doing that, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm doing my best to get a good, strong message out there. We are very, very serious about this. But when we put the name forward, we weren't even sure if we could get the 15% of the Parliamentary Labour Party to sign the nomination papers. And on the first day we got 11. I then realised that I hadn't nominated myself, so it went up to 12. So that was so we said there's a big surge today. We've gone from 11 to 12. We didn't bother to say it was me that was the surge. And then we got up to 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and then we stopped. And a lot of young people did a huge amount of work, and a lot of Labour MPs thought very hard. A lot of young people worked really hard on social media over that weekend to get a crowd going, saying there has to be a serious debate. The Labour Party belongs to all of us, not just to MPs. The Labour movement was founded by very brave people, long dead. It belongs to us as their descendants. There has to be an opportunity for a real debate about the direction in which this party and the movement is going to go. And to their credit, a number of MPs, including Frank Field, agreed to nominate, and with lots of time to spare, 118 seconds in fact, we made it and we got to 36 nominations, so we're on the ballot paper and it's our campaign. Now, I've been an MP for a long time. I represent London inner city constituency, and the election campaign was wonderful in my area. I sent out a 7-page election letter to all the voters in the constituency in which I outlined my views on austerity, on nuclear missiles, on war, on peace, on the kind of world that I strove to live in, and defended my voting record in Parliament and all the many issues I've been involved with. And I stood absolutely, totally and completely against any form of racism, discrimination, blame culture or anything else, because I want to live in a united society where we strive together to achieve better things rather than looking around for somebody else to blame all the time. And we got a great response, as did John McDonnell and many other people. But nevertheless, Labour lost the election. Now, I'm devastated by that. Everybody is, because we know the consequences of that. But surely the problem was Ed Miliband did his best in the election to say, get rid of zero-hours contracts, to talk about rights at work, to talk about the low-wage economy that Britain is. And also, to his credit, he's taken on Murdoch on a number of occasions, absolutely to his credit. But the problem was that fundamentally, when people got home, turned on the television, thought about it and listened to it, what was going to happen after the election? Were the cuts going to stop? Was the wage freeze in the public sector going to stop? Was the job loss in the civil service and other places going to stop? Because I found some news during the election. Apparently we were offering up cuts in particular departments after the election. We had accepted the fundamental of the austerity agenda being put forward ever since 2010. And until we stand up for what kind of society, community, life we want to live in and lead, we're not going to inspire people. You don't inspire people by saying, well, you're going to get really bad cuts with the Tories, but you'll get nice cuts with us. Because we know how to cut in a nice way. And so I believe that was one of the problems. And I did a lot of campaigning in the election. I went to 10 or more constituencies. And I found myself arguing with people in Kent, in Thanet, working class communities who were tempted to vote for UKIP. And I said, why? Are UKIP going to build you a house? Are UKIP going to build you a school? Are UKIP going to give you a nurse or a doctor or a teacher or anything? Don't know. But what are you going to do? I said, well, personally, I can tell you what I would like to do. I said, but you could kind of see their point. It was a sort of desperation that they'd moved into. They knew that Nigel Farage is a load of hot air and a lot of nonsense. They knew all that in their hearts. But they wanted a Labour Party and a Labour movement to represent them, that spoke their language, that was going to deal with their problems of low wages, bad housing, unemployment, short-term working, zero-hours contracts, and all those kind of issues. And parents wanted to know that their kids were going to get somewhere to live, and that their graduate children, many of them graduate children, weren't going to be forced into unpaid internships or unemployment even after they've worked really hard at college and university to get qualifications. They wanted some kind of hope, and that surely is what the Labour movement has to be about and has to be able to offer. So it means understanding the nature of the society in which we live. Now, yesterday we had the budget in Parliament, and I was there for it, of course, and listened to it. I've listened to lots of budgets, and Osborne spoke for just over an hour and went through a whole lot of things. But what are the fundamental real points in the budget? One, which wasn't stated during his speech, but it is there in what's called the Red Book, which is the sort of statistical analysis that comes out at the same time as the budget and is given to MPs as soon as he's finished the speech rather than started it, was the sale of public assets. £30 billion of public assets are being sold this year alone. Now, we thought Thatcher was big into privatisation. You know, BT, British Petroleum, gas, steel, electricity, water, you name it, she sold it. The highest level of sales ever under Margaret Thatcher was 1987, which was about today's prices, £18 billion. And that was catastrophic, because we know the stuff that was sold at that time. This government is selling £30 billion of public assets this year, including, they put it in this, the BBC offering up a cut of its own budget of £150 million to pay for TV licences for the over 75s. I'm very happy that over 75s don't have to pay a TV licence, but I think that should be a public responsibility, not be done at the expense of people working in the BBC or losing jobs in order to pay for it. It should be a government expenditure, not that. But that is relatively small compared to the other ones. Next one up is King's Cross. Now, many of you, I'm sure, have used King's Cross Station at some times. It's been brilliantly redeveloped. It's a beautiful area. It's a superb example of what good architecture, good design, good engineering can do with a good public open space. It's being sold off. It won't be a public space anymore. It'll be owned by some property company who will no doubt expand it, develop it, charge us all to use it, and probably stop us giving out leaflets there at the same time. That's going to go. And then you move into the other area of very large sums of money, and that is the shares in all the banks. Now, when Labour was in office in 2008-9, we had the banking crisis. I partly blame the Labour government for lack of banking regulation, absolutely. But I don't blame them for the subprime mortgage crisis in the USA. I don't blame them for the greed of speculators trying to move in and out of this country. And when they brought the banks into public ownership, I absolutely supported that. And indeed, there was no opposition to it in Parliament. All my life, I dreamt of being in Parliament to vote for the nationalisation of banks. Rushed in there, thinking there was going to be a vote, and there was no vote. There was no vote because nobody was going to oppose it, because the banks wanted that, because they needed our money in order to survive. The big problem was that the huge levels of bank shares that were bought by the public, by us, were then put into a holding company to be sold off at the discretion of the Chancellor of the Exchequer at any time with the Chancellor of the Exchequer's choosing. And George Osborne now chooses to sell all those shares, or most of those shares. And they're all being sold at a loss. So what is this about? You buy RBS shares at £3.50 and you sell them off at a loss. To who? To make more out of it in the future. We're selling off the profits of the future. All those shares should remain in public ownership. Those banks should include public directors of them. So we could say to those banks, hang on, we want you to invest in manufacturing industry. We want you to invest in green jobs. We want you to invest in high technology. We don't want you to invest in a property bubble in London and the South East, which is so damaging both to the life chances of people in the kind of communities I represent and to the rest of the country, as it sucks wealth into London and the South East, which doesn't reach the people of London and the South East. We need a direction to those banks in what they're doing. That means public control. That means public ownership. So why are we giving it up? And then you move on through the budget, and you realise this is all being done for a purpose. The next thing up is the cut in corporation tax. And George Osborne says we've cut corporation tax X, we've cut it Y, we're going to cut it lower and lower and lower, and we are cutting it lower than other countries in Europe. The next response, of course, is going to be France will cut a bit lower, Germany will cut a bit lower, and so on. So you have this ghastly race to the bottom in which you don't dare adequately tax the profits of global corporations for fear they would go somewhere else. Why are we allowing these people to play ducks and drakes with us? Why are we allowing Boots, for example, to move its corporate headquarters from Britain to Switzerland, where corporation tax is 5%, where here it would have been 20% at that time? That is the kind of issue that we have to face up to, getting control of what these global corporations do. Then next up in the budget is the issue of 12 billion cuts in welfare, presaged by an argument about the benefit cap. Now, the benefit cap at one level sounds like an awful lot of money. The benefit cap at the moment is 25,000, due to go down to 23,000, then to go down to 20,000. It sounds an awful lot of money, and it is an awful lot of money. But do the people on benefits actually get 25,000 a year? I've just had an email from a constituent of mine, and she's having to move out of my constituency, and she's very sad about that because she likes living in the area. She's very happy living in the area because her rent is, she's been in the place 8 years and it's never been decorated, it's private tenancy, never been decorated, no repairs, nothing done, is going up to £400 per week for a 2-bedroom flat. There's no way she can afford it. The benefit cap won't meet her needs, and so she's going to have to move. She is being socially cleansed from my part of London, as is happening all across London. And so, in the absence of control of rents and the absence of building sufficient houses, then the only alternative to ensure people have somewhere to live is to pay a sufficient level of housing benefit to ensure they have somewhere to live. And so my response to that is we deal with the housing crisis not by forcing councils to sell properties. Again, my council has just been told it's got to get rid of its high-value properties. My council is doing very well. I really admire their work on housing. They're building council housing, quite a lot of them. And we've just completed one very nice development of 25 flats, mostly family-sized flats. Very nice they are too. Nobody's yet moved into them. They're not going to be allowed to if the government has its way, because the council's being told it's got to sell them on the open market. Not one person on the housing waiting list is going to be able to buy somewhere on the open market. It's, again, the theft of a public asset to give it to private speculation away from us. And then councils have been told they've got to lower rents without any compensation to the loss on the housing revenue account. I've no problem with lowering rents, but I've got a big problem with lowering the housing costs, the housing finance that's available for local authorities to administer and improve their housing stock, and also forcing housing associations to sell places like councils with a £100,000 discount. I've done a study of the council places that have been sold. More than a third of those that have been sold in the last 10 years are now owned by quite large property companies that are renting them out on the private rented sector. It's simply wrong. It's not wrong that people want to own their own house. It's not wrong that people want to save to buy. It is wrong that we're ending up ripping off the public sector without providing sufficient council housing, that so many young people get nowhere to live, so many people still remain in overcrowded accommodation, so many people cannot move to any kind of place of choice because council housing stock as a whole has fallen down. We, as a party, did great work in the ideas of council housing, in the administration of council housing, in providing lifetime, secure, affordable tenancies to everybody. This lot want to marketise it, privatise it, sell it. And what's the result, ultimately, of this? Why? In modern Britain, today, the fourth richest country in the world, are the people sleeping on the streets of every big city, begging on the seaside town. There's something deeply immoral about it. I talk to people who are sleeping rough and begging everywhere I go, and I travel a great deal around the country. All of them have a personal story. There's always some tragedy, there's complications, sometimes mental health conditions, there's all sorts of issues, alcoholism, drugs, all kinds of things. And at one level, you listen to it and you have great sympathy, but then you realise that somewhere along the line, whilst we can and do, as a union and labour movement, defend the principle of healthcare free at the point of use, healthcare as a human right, we do defend that. What happened with the principles of the welfare state, which our ancestors fought for to get the idea that the state should care for everybody, all caring for one and one caring for all, a socialist principle? What's happened to that there's now such holes in the safety net of the welfare state? You find so many people that are homeless, you find so many people who've been through the availability for work test, who've been through horrors and high water on this one, and have ended up, in some cases tragically, even taking their own lives because of it. There's something deeply wrong with this. We as a party, we as a movement, should be strong enough, bold enough, capable enough to say we stand for the prevention of anybody falling into destitution in modern Britain. It is simply not right that people should be like that. And so we have to put forward an economic alternative that is not one of austerity, that is not one of growing inequality in Britain. In the past 5 years, inequality has got worse and worse. The 100 richest people own the equivalent of the wealth of a third of the rest of the population. The inequality levels are the worst in Britain of anywhere in Europe, and getting worse, because that is the whole agenda of what the Tory party have got. Now, I understand what the Tories are about. I understand Tories. I know what they're about. They're wealthy, they're greedy, and they try to con everybody else into believing that they too can be wealthy and greedy and everything will be well. I understand that. I know where they're coming from. I've seen them around for a long time. You've all seen them around for a long time. I don't need any lessons from them. No, nobody does. What we do need is to be strong enough and bold enough to put forward a rational, sensible alternative, which is about valuing everybody. It is about making sure every child has a nursery, has a school, has a doctor, has hope. Everyone has somewhere decent to live. Every young person has a chance of getting a good job and developing themselves. So that means public investment. It means public participation. It means public development in industries and all the other things that go with it. But the agenda of austerity is really about re-empowering the very wealthy and re-empowering global corporations. Look at the threat of the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. It's not just to the NHS. It's to the whole principles of union organisation, of environmental protection, of rights at work and everything else. It empowers global corporations to take governments to court under the so-called investor protection scheme that's been put forward. And I think we've got to be very, very strong in opposing TTIP and the secrecy surrounding TTIP. But we've also got to... We've also got to look at the issues of what happens when other people stand up. Now, I've been in Greece several times. I know Alex Tsipras very well. I've spoken at rallies with him in his election campaign in Greece. Fortunately, I wasn't expected to speak in Greek, and fortunately, at least half of the audience fully understood. Thank you very much, Alex, you're a comrade. Understood English very well. Greece has been through hell and high water. They've had their banking system collapsed, not because the Greek people are greedy, lazy, or anything else that's being said in the papers. It's because they were forced into debt after debt. They were then forced into an austerity program which was unpayable. The government then fell. The right-wing government came in, it fell. Another government came in, it fell, because none of them could carry out the levels of austerity required by the European Central Bank. And so we reached a situation in Greece where the debt hasn't gone down in 5 years of austerity, it's gone up. It's gone up by almost 50%. And so Tsipras and the Syriza party eventually won the election and have done their best to stand up against the European Central Bank. And they're being told this is the last chance saloon. Well, there's been lots of last chance saloons. But I thought the result of the referendum last Sunday was amazing. Yeah. Because these are people that have been frightened. The banks are closed. You only take out 60 euros a day. There is mass unemployment. 50% of the young people are unemployed. There's mass poverty. But they said, hang on. We have a right to elect the government we want. We have a right to try and create the kind of society we want. And if even the International Monetary Fund says that debt is unpayable, then it pretty certainly is unpayable. I mean, I would have thought so anyway. And so I think we should send a message of solidarity and support to the Greek people in standing up. There's lots more I could say, but I just want to conclude with this. This is a campaign about developing ideas, about strengthening our movement, about putting forward some difference. It's about we, all of us, that have a view of a different way of running the world. We stood and marched against the Iraq War. We've seen the consequences of the disasters of Afghanistan, Iraq and Libya, the growth of ISIL, as a result of that, partly as a result of that. And we've seen the victims, those poor people that are dying in the Mediterranean just trying to get to a place of safety. When a country goes to war on a lie, as we did in Iraq, the consequences don't end there. They go on and on and on. And so during this whole process, can't we try and develop a different foreign policy, a different view of the world, a view of the world that is about supporting and defending human rights, that is about defending our environment, is about supporting people in desperate straits, rather than our ability to go to war anywhere in the world. I've spent my life as a member of the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament because I believe nuclear weapons to be fundamentally immoral. I believe that... I believe that nuclear weapons are, as I said, completely immoral. unnecessary and very expensive. And so I've made it very clear that the view I take, and it's shared by a lot of people, is that we should not renew the Trident nuclear missile system in 2016. But I also recognise that every policy has a consequence. And there are a lot of very, very skilled people working in manufacturing arms, manufacturing in the arms industry, as well as making the submarines that will carry the nuclear weapons. And so we are suggesting that there has to be a real, meaningful defence diversification agency that involves the workers in the industry as well as the rest of the community, and there has to be a very large amount of investment in developing alternative products and alternative jobs. I don't want to make people unemployed by this policy. I want to see a stronger, real economy producing things for social good rather than weapons that can only maim, kill and cause problems around the world. And so, my friends, we are doing this campaign very seriously. And we've now had 14 hustings debates. We've only got 21 more to go. So by my reckoning, we're almost a third of the way through the hustings, and we're doing meetings in every town and city in the whole country. And so a lot of us are travelling all the time. Obviously, I can't get to all of them, but colleague MPs, John McDonnell, Becky Long-Bailey, Clive Lewis, lots of people are doing their very best to help in this and to ensure that we get that debate out there. 40,000 more people have joined the Labour Party since the general election. They've joined because they want to see, I believe, a better, different and more active party that isn't afraid either of its socialist past, isn't afraid of its affiliation to the trade unions. Don't treat the unions like some kind of embarrassing uncle that turns up at Christmas time. Treat the unions for what they are, a very, very important part of our community, and a very, very important political voice that's got to be given. So this campaign is enjoyable. It's very, very, sorry, it's not emotion, it's a dry throat. I don't do emotion, I do dry throats. And I just want to say, in conclusion, thank you very much for inviting me here today. Thanks for all the friendship and support that we are giving. What? Span the world with friendship. Brilliant. Excellent. Yes. The slogan of the Woodcraft folk, and I'll just say this, we started the campaign when I was invited to cut a cardboard cake. The Woodcraft folk do things in strange ways. A cardboard cake to commemorate 50 years of the Woodcraft folk in London. No, 75 years rather. And it was fantastic. They are a cooperative youth group, which some of you may well be aware of. We're all a cooperative youth group in a way, because we're all working together to try and achieve something strong. When we work together, when we dream together, when we hope together, when we demand together, when we protect together, as we do in the unions and community movements and everything else, we are much stronger. What Britain needs is a real social movement to bring about the social change that are necessary to give real hopes and real justice in our society. Thank you very much.